Stop blaming aging. If you're over 60, weak legs are rarely about age itself. They're about missing signals your muscles are starving for. In this video, I reveal 20 specific plants that turn leg strength back on, starting at the cellular level. Here's the part nobody talks about. Loss of independence after 60 almost always begins below the waist. Weak legs don't just limit movement, they shrink your world. They change how far you're willing to go, how long you stay out, whether you say yes or no to life. And yet, leg aging is treated like an unavoidable inconvenience instead of the central biological crisis it really is. We assume it's normal aging, when in reality it's a breakdown in communication between your muscles, your blood vessels, and the signals coming from the food you eat. Most seniors are doing one of two things. Some exercise faithfully, walking every day, lifting light weights, staying disciplined. Others focus on diet, eating more vegetables, more plants, fewer processed foods. Both groups are trying. Both groups care. And yet, very few are combining the right plants with the actual biological demands of aging muscle. That gap, that silent gap, is where leg strength is lost. Not because effort is missing, but because the instructions are incomplete. Let me put this into a frame that Dr. Mark Hyman often uses because it's one of the clearest ways to understand what's really happening. Food is not calories. Food is information. Every bite you take sends instructions to your cells. Some foods tell your blood vessels to open. Some tell your muscles to repair. Some tell your mitochondria, the energy engines inside your leg muscles, to produce power instead of fatigue. And some foods, especially when missing, send no signal at all. The tragedy is that many seniors are eating healthy, but not eating instructionally. Their legs are starving for the right messages. Biologically, the legs are uniquely vulnerable after 60. They contain the largest muscle groups in the body, which means they require the most blood flow, the most oxygen, the most protein, and the most recovery support. At the same time, aging reduces nitric oxide, stiffens arteries, dulls protein signaling, and slows energy production. So the legs are asked to do the most while receiving the least. That mismatch creates weakness, heaviness, slow reaction time, and the kind of fatigue that doesn't feel dramatic, but feels limiting. And the emotional cost of that limitation is real. Leg weakness shows up when you try to rise from a low chair and need to push off with your hands. It shows up when stairs make you pause. It shows up when you hesitate before stepping off a curb or walking on uneven ground. Over time, confidence erodes. Movement becomes cautious. And once movement shrinks, muscle loss accelerates. That's the downward spiral no one warns you about early enough. But here's the truth that should give you hope. This decline is not inevitable. Your legs are not used up. They are under-supported. When you feed leg muscles the right plants that restore blood flow, reactivate protein signaling, fuel movement, and speed recovery, you change the entire trajectory. You don't just slow decline, you reverse it. I've seen it happen in people who were told to accept their age and quietly refused to. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 20 specific longevity plants that directly support leg strength after 60. Not in a vague, trendy way, but in a targeted, physiological way. These are plants that tell your leg muscles to receive blood again, to respond to protein again, to generate energy again, and to recover instead of inflame. This is not about extremes, supplements, or chasing youth. This is about giving your legs the instructions they've been missing. Because strong legs don't just move you forward. They keep you independent. They keep you social. They keep you confident. And when we get this right, when movement and the right plants work together, your legs can carry you not just through the next year, but through the next decades. It's easy to think of leafy greens as background food, something added to the plate because it's good for you, without ever considering what they actually do once they enter the body. For many older adults, greens are treated like passive insurance, vitamins here, minerals there, useful but not powerful. And yet from a physiological standpoint, these plants play one of the most decisive roles in whether aging legs feel alive and responsive or heavy and uncooperative. As the body moves past 60, one of the earliest and most damaging changes occurs in the blood vessels. Nitric oxide production begins to fall. This molecule is not discussed nearly enough outside of research circles, but it functions like a master switch for circulation. Nitric oxide tells blood vessels to relax and widen, allowing oxygen, glucose, and amino acids to reach working muscle tissue. When its levels drop, Leg muscles are still there, still willing to work, but they are undersupplied. The result is a familiar sensation many people struggle to describe: legs that feel thick, slow, or fatigued long before they should. Certain leafy greens contain naturally occurring nitrates that the body converts into nitric oxide through a remarkably efficient pathway. This is not a stimulant effect. It's not artificial energy. It's restoration of a signal the body once produced effortlessly. When that signal is restored, blood flow to the legs improves during movement, walking feels smoother, and muscles receive the resources they need to perform without strain. What looks like weakness from the outside is often just poor circulation at the cellular level. An analogy helps make this clearer. Imagine leg muscles as farmland. The soil may still be rich, the crops still capable of growing, but without proper irrigation, nothing thrives. Aging reduces the flow of that irrigation. Nitrate-rich greens reopen the channels. They don't create strength on their own, but they allow strength to emerge again when the body is asked to move. This distinction matters because many people are already exercising. They walk, they stay active, they remain committed, and yet they notice a strange resistance in the legs, as if effort no longer translates into ease. In clinical settings, this pattern shows up again and again. Arthur, a 72-year-old man who exercised consistently, described his legs as feeling heavy, especially at the start of movement. Nothing was wrong on paper, but once circulation support was restored through diet, that heaviness gradually lifted, not because the muscles changed overnight, but because they were finally being supplied again. Spinach, kale, arugula, and lettuce are especially effective in this role. Consumed daily in simple amounts, they provide a steady stream of nitrate availability that supports circulation during activity. Timing matters as well. When these greens are eaten a few hours before walking or leg-focused movement, the conversion to nitric oxide aligns with muscle demand. The legs receive blood when they need it most, not hours later when the opportunity has passed. What's important to understand is that this is not about chasing youth or pushing harder. It's about removing an invisible bottleneck that aging quietly installs. When blood flow is restored, movement feels less forced. Muscles respond more willingly. And for many, the simple act of walking begins to feel natural again, not because the body has been pushed, but because it has finally been supported. When circulation improves at this level, it sets the stage for everything that follows. Endurance lasts longer. Strength work becomes more effective. Recovery feels smoother. This is the foundation, not the finish line. And once that foundation is in place, the next layer of leg longevity begins to reveal itself. Leg fatigue is often framed as an unavoidable companion of aging, something to tolerate rather than understand. As the years pass, many people notice that walks become shorter, pauses more frequent, and the distance between benches more important. This change is rarely dramatic. It unfolds quietly, step by step, until endurance feels like a memory rather than a capacity. Yet beneath this experience lies a very specific biological shift, one that has less to do with willpower and far more to do with how efficiently leg muscles generate energy. With age, the body's ability to use oxygen declines. VO2 max, a measure of how well oxygen is delivered and used during movement, naturally drops over time. Inside the leg muscles, mitochondria, the tiny structures responsible for turning oxygen and nutrients into usable energy, become less efficient. The result is that walking costs more. Each step demands more effort than it once did, even if strength appears unchanged. What people interpret as getting older is often a rising energy tax on movement. Certain root and aromatic plants influence this process in a remarkable way. Beetroot, radish, and fennel contain compounds that support mitochondrial efficiency while also contributing to nitric oxide availability. Together, these effects reduce the oxygen cost of movement. The legs are not suddenly stronger in a visible way, but they become more economical. They do more with less. Walking requires fewer internal resources, and endurance naturally extends without strain. A useful way to picture this is through fuel quality. Two cars may look identical on the outside, but the one running on higher-grade fuel travels farther on the same amount of gas. These plants operate in a similar fashion. They don't force the legs to work harder. They allow the muscles to extract more usable energy from each breath and each nutrient delivered through the bloodstream. This shift can be subtle at first, People notice that they stop thinking about their legs as much. The constant internal negotiation, how far to go, when to turn back, whether there will be a place to rest, begins to quiet. Dolores, 68 years old, described this change not as sudden strength, but as continuity. She found herself walking farther before the idea of stopping even crossed her mind. The walk flowed instead of fragmenting. Beetroot has been studied extensively for its role in endurance, particularly in older adults, because it supports both circulation and cellular energy use. Radishes and fennel add complementary compounds that influence blood flow and digestion, ensuring that nutrients are absorbed and delivered efficiently. Together, these plants create a metabolic environment where leg muscles are no longer operating at a disadvantage. What's striking is how this influences confidence as much as capacity. When endurance improves, movement feels predictable again. The fear of sudden fatigue fades. Steps feel more reliable. Over time, this reliability encourages more movement, which further reinforces muscle preservation and balance. It's a quiet upward cycle that begins at the cellular level and expresses itself as freedom. This stage of leg support builds directly on restored circulation. Once blood can reach the muscles, the next question becomes how efficiently those muscles use what they receive. By improving energy economy, these roots and aromatics extend walking power, not by pushing limits, but by lowering the cost of motion itself. And once endurance stabilizes, the body becomes ready for the next challenge, rebuilding and preserving muscle tissue that time has slowly taught to resist growth. There comes a point in aging when effort and reward begin to drift apart. People stay active, remain consistent, and yet the legs no longer seem to respond the way they once did. Strength plateaus, muscle tone softens, recovery stretches longer. This isn't a failure of discipline or motivation. It's a biological shift known as anabolic resistance, and it changes the rules of how muscle tissue responds to nourishment, especially in the lower body. Anabolic resistance means that muscle cells become less sensitive to protein signals. In younger years, even modest protein intake could activate muscle repair and growth. After 60, that same signal barely registers unless it reaches a certain threshold. The legs, which house the largest and most metabolically demanding muscles, are affected first. They remain capable of rebuilding, but they require a clearer, stronger message to do so. This is where high-protein plant foods take on a role that is often underestimated. Lentils, chickpeas, black beans, soy, edamame, tofu, and peas contain amino acid profiles that, when consumed in sufficient amounts, stimulate muscle protein synthesis, even in older tissue. The issue has never been whether plants can support muscle, but whether the quantity and distribution are aligned with aging physiology. When that alignment is missing, muscles appear stubborn and unresponsive. A helpful analogy is that of a locked door. Protein is the key. Earlier in life, a light turn opened the door with ease. With age, the lock stiffens. The key still works, but it must be turned with more intention. Once that resistance is overcome, the door opens just as it always did. Muscle cells behave the same way. They haven't lost their capacity to grow. They've raised the threshold for activation. Leon, 75, embodied this pattern clearly. He remained physically active and focused on leg training, yet saw little progress for years. Only when his meals consistently delivered enough plant-based protein did his legs begin to respond again. Strength returned not in dramatic leaps, but in steady, reliable gains that felt sustainable rather than forced. Another critical piece of this process is distribution. Aging muscle responds better when protein is spread throughout the day rather than concentrated in a single meal. Each feeding becomes a separate signal, reminding the muscles that repair is both possible and necessary. When this signaling is consistent, the legs stop slipping into conservation mode and re-enter a state of maintenance and renewal. What often surprises people is how this shift influences stability and balance. As muscle tissue becomes better nourished, reaction time improves. Small stabilizing muscles around the hips, knees, and ankles begin to engage more effectively. Walking feels firmer. Standing feels more secure. These are subtle changes, but they are foundational to preventing falls and maintaining independence. Protein in this context is not about bulk or appearance. It is about structural integrity. The legs are pillars, and without adequate building material, even the strongest foundation erodes. When high-protein plants are integrated in a way that matches the realities of aging biology, muscle-building pathways reopen. And once they do, the legs regain not just strength but resilience. This restoration of muscle responsiveness prepares the body for the final layer of leg longevity, the ability to fuel movement and recover from it. Strength without energy leads to fatigue. Effort without recovery leads to inflammation. To truly support aging legs, the system must be complete. Leg strength does not fail simply because muscle disappears. In many cases, the legs lose their reliability because energy and recovery systems quietly fall behind. Movement remains possible, but it starts to feel expensive. A short walk creates lingering heaviness. Mild effort leaves stiffness that lasts into the next day. Over time, the legs begin to associate activity with discomfort, and that association alone is enough to shrink daily movement. At the center of this shift is how aging muscles manage fuel. The legs rely heavily on glycogen to contract smoothly and repeatedly. As the years pass, glycogen storage becomes less efficient, and muscles are forced to operate in a low-energy state. This doesn't feel like sharp pain or injury. It feels like dragging weight that shouldn't be there. Complex carbohydrates from whole plant sources restore steady fuel availability, allowing muscles to work without triggering stress signals that accelerate fatigue. Recovery is equally decisive. Aging muscle and connective tissue produce more inflammation after use, and without adequate support, that inflammation lingers. Polyphenols and sulfur compounds from certain plants reduce oxidative stress and calm the inflammatory response that stiffens joints and delays repair. When recovery improves, soreness shortens. The legs reset faster. Movement stops feeling like something to recover from and starts feeling neutral again. This balance between fuel and recovery preserves momentum. When the legs no longer punish activity, consistency returns naturally. Strength is maintained not through force but through sustainability, which is the true foundation of leg longevity after 60. Leg strength after 60 is rarely lost all at once. It fades when blood flow, energy, protein signaling, and recovery quietly fall out of balance. When these supports are restored through daily patterns, the legs respond with resilience. Strong legs preserve confidence, independence, and freedom far longer than aging myths suggest.